Well, good evening, everybody. And once again, you have joined Iowa Prison Perspectives. I'm Sue Hutchins, and I am the person who does this channel and who does the interviews with people who have either been in prison and are now out, people who love someone who has been in prison or is currently in prison, people who have worked in the Department of Corrections, either in Iowa or other states, specifically have worked in prison, and also other advocates such as myself who have an interest in changing some of the laws and some of the rules to make prison reform more realistic and more positive. This particular channel is sponsored by Iowa Prison Perspective. Iowa Prisons Perspectives is sponsored by Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, the Iowa Justice Action Network, and Iowa Cure. I really would like to hear from you and hear your opinions about what you think about what I'm doing here, what you think about whether you agree or don't agree, what you think about what you hear here. And if you want to make any contact with me, I would love that. I can be found at Iowa Prison Perspectives at gmail.com, and that's IA Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. Tonight, we are going to hear from a young man whose name is Mark, and he is going to share his experience in prison and some of the lessons that he has taken from prison and what his life is like now since he has been out of prison. He's also going to tell us a little bit about what prison was like for the people who cared about him and the people who loved him, how his prison experience affected them. So I shall turn it over to Mark, and Mark, it is all yours.
Thanks, Sue. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be connected with this opportunity and with the advocacy that you're doing and with the information that you're sharing. And initially, I'll share a little bit of my story and just give some perspective on what my journey has been over these past years. Over the past years, from a professional standpoint, I've been a physical therapist. I've owned a couple businesses. It was about 9 or 10 years ago that I was having some difficulty, some financial problems in my business at that time. And instead of being truthful and honest and getting the help that I needed to admit the problems that I was dealing with financially, I created a fake investment and lied to multiple people who ended up becoming victims of my financial fraud. Within a couple of years, I was found out. FBI agent approached me and I recognized that the gig was up and I couldn't control it. I couldn't fix it. And the reality of me trying to take control of things ended up in a bad way. I ended up going to federal prison. I had an 80-month sentence, ended up spending 3 years in prison in the midst of what was happening with COVID, and saw an early release due to the social distancing that was happening in federal prisons, but then was back in Iowa with home confinement with an ankle monitor for a period of time. At this point now, I'm on probation and walking through that probation period and continuing to honor the guidelines and the stipulations that go along with that piece. Admittedly, like I said, I take the responsibility for the mistakes that I made. And even as you referenced, there was a huge impact on family, on friends, on people that were close to me. And things blew up when the reality was found out, even as my wife, my kids, other family members recognized that I had set up a fake investment and I had not been honest about what I was doing. As we understand the crimes that cause us to do things or the crimes that put us in prison, oftentimes it's selfish things, whether it's related to substances, whether it's related to other things that we're doing that end up violently. For me, it was financial frauds. It was a white collar crime, and while there maybe wasn't significant damage from a physical standpoint, there was significant damage as related to emotional, mental, spiritual sides of things with family members. As I went into prison, one of my mentors said to me, learn everything that you can during this time. And I'll never forget that, because that was one of the things as I stepped into federal prison that was meaningful to me, because there are one of two directions that we can go. We can go
Sure.
up or we can go down. Some guys stay in the middle from what I saw in prison, but we can choose to get better or we can choose to get worse. So attitude goes a long ways in deciding which direction that we're going. As I stepped
Mhm.
into that process, I recognized for me, in terms of the restoration, that it was going to be beneficial to apologize. It was going to be beneficial to repent, to surrender. And that's still an ongoing process. It's not a one and done, but it's a process that happens over time. And I'm thankful for the support that I received from friends and family who communicated with me, whether it was by phone, by email, by letter, by visit. The reality for myself, even as I stepped into prison, it was a significant breach in trust with my wife and my kids and other family members. And so that was one of the biggest challenges as it related to working through that time. During the time that I was,
Can you talk just a little bit about what that process was like between you and your wife, as far as from the time that she found out until now? Just give us a little bit of information about how that worked for the two of you.
yes, we had been married for 20 plus years. So obviously we had an established relationship. We worked together through things over the years. But unfortunately, I had been significantly dishonest with her. So that was a huge breach of trust. Before going to prison, we worked through counseling. And even during the time that I was in prison, we worked through things. Unfortunately, we're divorced. But I would say, in the midst of working through that process, we're friends at this point. And I
Mhm.
appreciate that. I value that even as she took the high road to work through things and recognizing the mistakes that I made, is still doing what she can to maintain that relationship. And even as we have kids and grandkids together,
Sure.
to continue to move forward with life. So it's a process, it's a journey. But again, I appreciate what she has done to step into the game and obviously identify that margin or that boundary with the mistakes that I've made, but continue to move forward and do the best that we can yet as it relates to the family that we have.
Yes, and I think it's really important for people to hear that loved ones, it's very difficult for loved ones when someone goes that they care about goes to prison. And if they don't know anything about what the crime has been while it's going on, to find out about it feels like a huge betrayal. And it's difficult to reestablish any kind of trust. And I applaud you and your wife for being able to get through that to where you are now. A lot of people don't make it. I mean, they won't even speak again. There's so much bitterness and so much hatred, which in my belief really harms the children, and
Right.
it's also harmful to the loved one to hold on to that kind of bitterness. It's harmful to any victim to hold on to bitterness and let it become their sort of best friend. That because you can't heal if you are going to hold on to that kind of resentment. So I appreciate you talking about that and being willing to share your experience. And I certainly applaud the two of you. So
Well,
thank you
thank
for
you.
sharing that.
I I would say along with that, again, my wife did a great job of walking with our kids through that process because again, it was a huge disappointment for my children to recognize that their dad had been dishonest for a couple of years, and for them to recognize the ripple of how that played out in terms of reputation and relationships and those things. So from my standpoint, I applaud my kids also for working through that process and giving me an opportunity to over time be able to step back into their lives. So
Yes.
that's the beauty of restoration, reconciliation, transformation. My lesson in that process has been to be patient, to trust the process, to be, I'd say the biggest thing is probably just that patience piece over time. And I'd say the realization for me also over these past 5 years during the time in prison and now reintegrating back into culture, society, relationships is giving it the time and recognizing the impact on others. So earlier on, I said, those of us that are offenders, those of us that commit crimes, are focused on ourselves, and
Mhm.
typically crimes are selfish related. And I'm
Mhm.
speaking in generality there, but a lesson that I've learned is to recognize others and to become more aware, more cognizant, more understanding, more compassionate. Unfortunately for myself, just in terms of my personality, when I was being dishonest, is I was mostly focused on myself and I was disconnected emotionally. So
Mhm.
that's all part of the process too. Even as I recognize others that have been challenged, whether it's family members or folks that have been the offenders, just recognizing how to walk through that process to give grace, but to also maintain accountability, working through that journey.
Yes, yes. There's the saying, "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable,"
Yeah,
which I totally subscribe to that belief, and it's very difficult. So it sounds like you felt a great relief when you finally were able to tell the truth, and you also felt a great deal of remorse and guilt. And it's a matter of you sort of clean up your side of the street, and then you can hold your head high because you know you're not doing that anymore. And that's really important spiritually and emotionally. And it's important for your kids to see that and to be able to build some trust in who you are now. But yeah, that takes, so good for you and good for them. Please let them know that I really admire that, and let your ex-wife know that I really do admire that. So
thank
okay, and
you.
now you can continue with what you wanted to talk about. I
Yeah,
just have such a heart for the families and for the difficulty that families go through, and they seem to be forgotten in so many ways in our culture and society, how they're affected and the difficulties that they struggle with someone that they love who's gone to prison for something illegal.
yeah.
So thank you for being willing to share that.
So in response to that, I'd say I've developed more of a heart for those family members. So even
Mhm,
some of my peers that have still been in prison or working through that process, or individuals that have gone to prison and knowing their family members, it's an opportunity to offer perspective and to journey
mhm,
together, which I'd say that's another lesson that I've learned is we're better together, which is a cliche,
mhm,
but it's the truth. And I'd even
mhm.
say that as a male, for us as men, we tend to be independent. We're maybe individualistic. We want to do things on our own. We want to be in control. The reality is that we're better together.
Yeah.
And even while I had men that I was friends with before going to prison, I chose to do my own thing, and I wasn't honest. I wasn't accountable. So that's another lesson that I've learned, and probably something that I'd even say to family members. As we're reintegrating, just being able to stay in community with each other, somebody or some buddies that we can be walking together, and
Mhm.
just with the challenges of life, because it's tough to do things on our own, and we're made to be in community. We're made to walk together.
Yes. 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 Thank you very much. I really appreciate you addressing that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Some of the other things that I'd say too, even since I've been out, walking through or working through the home confinement, and now even in this probation period, some of the groups that have been beneficial that I've
Mhm.
connected with, or that have been beneficial, I'd say, for families. And I'll reference a couple different things that I've been connected with. And then what I'll mention also is once you post this video or this interview to YouTube, I'll type my email in the comments, my email address. So if people have more questions about anything, I'm sure willing to respond to that as well.
Perfect. I appreciate that a lot, and I'm sure that the viewers will also.
So one group in particular that's been beneficial for me is Celebrate Recovery, which is similar to AA or NA, but
Mhm.
a faith-based approach. And just looking at the reality that we deal with, and this is part of the theme of it, we deal with hurts, habits, and hangups. So there are
Mhm.
different challenges, and we might think that a group with 12 steps is focused on addictions or recovery from some addiction, but we're all dealing with stuff. And what
Right.
I found is Celebrate Recovery has been a connection to walk with others, and then even family members in the midst of just being connected with community.
Mhm.
Another group, I'm located in central Iowa, so another group that I've worked with on a volunteer basis is a group in Des Moines called Change Course, which has a 6-month program geared towards folks that are trying to step into a more significant vocational career. So folks
Mhm.
that have been challenged due to incarceration or poverty or addiction. And Joe and Karen Johnson with this program called Change Course have done a good job over these past 3 years with offering a structured program to assist people that need a second chance and need an
Mhm.
opportunity and a guided process to step back into a better life with more advantages from a vocational standpoint and support and mentorship. So
Mhm.
that's another group. And then even as we've talked about the impact on families. Another group that I've volunteered with is Prison Fellowship, and as Prison
Mhm.
Fellowship has been involved in the prisons, outside of the prisons, and then even with their angel tree program to be able to reach out and walk with kids, whether it's with gifts, Christmas time, or it's maybe a summer camp, or the prison fellowship and one of the churches in the Des Moines area is going to host a night in June for these kids connected with Angel Tree to go to an Iowa Cubs game, just have a
That's
night out at
awesome.
the ballpark.
Yeah.
So that's my heart also is just seeing the benefit of walking with families, and maintaining those connections because it's tough. And,
Yes, it
it's a
is.
challenge, especially as things don't go our way or there are hardships that we're dealing with.
Yes, 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 and I agree, and thank you very much for mentioning those. And I will just put a plug in there for my my group that's called Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, that is for support for family members and other loved ones. You don't have to be a family member, and we meet on Zoom. And then there's also Iowa Cure has a support group for people who have someone that they care about who's incarcerated, whether it be husband, wife, brother, sister, friend, cousin, whatever. So I believe that's really important, and thank you for mentioning that, the groups that you're aware of, and also FAM. There's a
Yeah,
national organization, FAM, FAMM, which stands for Families Against Mandatory Minimums, and that's sort of their main purpose. But they also deal with all kinds of incarceration. It doesn't matter what a person is incarcerated for and what their sentence is. Um, and that is online. People can find that online. So thank you, because I appreciate that's where my heart is. So thank you very
yeah.
much. And now we will get back to you and your experience and kind of what the lessons are that you learned from being in prison and what your life was like while you were incarcerated.
Yeah, I was at a federal facility. I was in Yankton, South Dakota, minimum security. So, for those that have done time, some might say it was a cupcake. It wasn't significant. It was right in the community of Yankton, former college campus, but it's prison. And the reality, even as I was in prison from December of 19 to December of 22, COVID was happening during that time. So there was a fair amount of lockdown or lock in, just relative to the guidelines that were in play from a Bureau of Prison standpoint. So that was a challenge. And prison is prison when it comes down to it. So it's trying to
Right.
figure out what that looks like. I found a structure relative to what worked for me, at least at my location. It was the expectation that every inmate had a job. With my background in physical therapy and fitness, initially I had a job in the gym, but then the gym shut down when COVID hit. So things changed. So things got quiet for a while, but even both my parents were teachers and I enjoy learning and reading. So as things opened back up, I stepped into the educational department and worked as a tutor with individuals that were working on their GED, and then even the local college campus there, Mount Marty, worked with students through the prison with inmates that stepped into college programming. So that was fulfilling also to have some purpose, working with guys. And I learned, I'd say one of the lessons that I learned in prison was how to relate to others. Uh, we're all different, but trying to
Mhm.
find some commonalities or finding, the things that maybe we have a connection and just, I'd say also being respectful of others. And even that greed and pride and entitlement that had been my shadow side, which was part of me getting into trouble because I was trying to do things on my own,
Uh-huh.
becoming more humble and just becoming more real and more patient. That was probably another thing too. Not being as quick to speak, but being a better listener, and just
Mhm.
being more patient with the process, and getting to know individuals. And again, that's more of a generality. And men, women, any of us that have done time, we try to figure out what's the routine or structure that works for us. What's the best
Mhm.
way for us to spend our time and have some purpose in the midst of that.
What was the most difficult part of prison for you psychologically?
I'd say, the separation from family and
Right.
friends. Loneliness, that's the thing that was the most significant. Loneliness. Um, my dad passed away when I was in prison, and because of COVID and just the regulations or the guidelines, I wasn't able to get out for his
Mhm.
memorial or funeral. Um, uh, just the things that are happening with family. My first
Mhm.
grandchild that was born, not being around for that, albeit I appreciate that my daughters and my ex-wife came to visit me when I was in prison. So even my first granddaughter came to prison and visited me there in the visiting room. So, there's still hope and there's still joy in the midst of some of those challenges, but it's being patient with the process and
Mhm.
and dealing with that. So I'd say one of the challenges for us, even as we work through our challenges, whatever that might be, whether it's our addictions or our criminal behavior, is being real about those things. So,
Mhm.
I appreciated, I'm going to call it the brotherhood, or brothers that, the fellow men that were of a similar mindset. And for me, faith was important. And my belief in God and my Christianity. So,
Mhm.
even being able to be real with other men that were dealing with that same process, spending time together, studying, and just having that friendship or that community to be able to walk through those things. So, that helped. I'd
Yes.
say, another thing, and, part of this is what I know with my background in healthcare, but another thing that was beneficial was staying active. So even while we were locked in, we still had opportunity to walk in our unit. And I would say probably one of the best things for myself, not just physically, but even mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, was staying active somehow in some way.
Yes.
So, I'd say that even to friends and family members of folks that are incarcerated, to encourage that multidimensional health as it relates to staying active or keeping the mind fluid and keeping the mind active. Those are all things that are beneficial to stay engaged and to keep moving forward.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And then do you have any what was a typical day like for you in prison? And what are the lessons, the main lessons? You said you wanted to talk about the main, I guess, life lessons or mindful lessons that you learned being
Yeah,
incarcerated.
the routine for me, a typical day with the bunk counts that we had, or we call them, the counts. I tend to be more of an early morning person. Back in the day when I was in middle school and high school, I had a Des Moines Register morning paper route. So I got used to getting up early. So even that first count that happened at 5 a.m., I often got up after that count cleared to be able to have some time to read, to study the Bible, to pray, to journal. So I found that structure was beneficial for me. I was alert in the morning. It was quiet. Most
Mhm.
guys were still sleeping. They were still in their bunks, but that was beneficial for me, that structure and that routine, the solitude and just the individual time. For me, I went to breakfast at the Chow Hall. That was of value to me too, even from a health standpoint. And for me, the structure of having that job as a tutor, went to
Mhm.
work in the morning, went to the Chow Hall for lunch, went back to the education department in the afternoon. And then for me, even in the evening, the routine or structure of, if the gym was open, going to the gym, or, doing something, maybe spending some time in the TV room, but not the whole night. So I'd say, some structure, some variety was helpful during the day.
Mhm.
I'd say one of those lessons learned also, though, was the community piece. So, just finding the value of getting together. And maybe it was just, walking with another gentleman, or,
Mhm.
even as we had that community time, Bible study, or, group study, just being able to spend that time together.
Yes, yes. So it's not one of the differences between the federal system and the state system here in Iowa. I mean, the states, we don't have a federal prison here in Iowa. So federal prisons on a national level and our state prisons, one of the major differences is programming. There's a lot of valuable programs that people can take when they are in federal facilities. What is missing in Iowa's system is that there is not nearly enough of that at this point. And there was a time when it was better before the murders that happened at Anamosa. It was better. It still wasn't awesome like the federal system can offer. And of course, the camps or the low prisons or the minimum offer more than what the maximum prisons in the federal system. But you were in a place that offered some really, really good opportunities for development, and it's encouraged in the federal system. It's not so good. And so that's one of the things that I have found that people who one of the concerns or complaints that people in the state of Iowa have about our system is that there just is not enough to do and not enough to learn from. We just don't have the kind of programming that would really, really benefit people like what you experienced and were able to give while you were in prison. So I just wanted to make that point that that's one of the major differences between the federal system and our state system.
Yeah. And I would agree with you that there's significant value with having programming.
Mhm.
Obviously it's something to plug into. It's good for our minds. It's good for our identity, uh, yeah, for our emotional benefit, for the intelligence, and even for being able to step back in successfully with getting back into the world.
Right.
So yeah, I would say too, at whatever level things could be implemented here in the state, that would be good.
It would
I
be.
am grateful for those opportunities. And I saw, even like I said, offering the tutoring for the GED program during those couple years that I was connected with the education department and working with some other peers of mine, some other inmates that were tutors. I think we had 25 of our peers that achieved their GED during that time.
Mhm.
So that's a huge benefit for them vocationally, but even a huge boost with their own morale to know, hey, I could do this, or I did it. Even
Mhm.
though I had dropped out as a ninth grader or a seventh grader or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
and I wasn't successful with that first go around as a teenager, you know what? I was able to do this now. I was able to apply myself.
Well, my understanding is that the federal system expects you to get your GED while you're incarcerated. I mean, that's a mandatory expectation that you have a job while you're in there and that you get your GED. It's
That's
not,
correct.
yeah, it's not a voluntary. You can get it if you want to. It's mandatory. So,
Right.
which I personally think is wonderful. I mean, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
People have a lot better chance of succeeding out here with an education than they do without an education. So I sure agree with
Yeah.
that. And now if you would talk about what it was like to come out of prison, what your reentry was like initially, and how it has developed since you have been out.
Sure. Obviously there's the excitement with getting out, even for the little things like going to McDonald's or going to Walmart or going to the grocery store. But it's all a process. And I would say, even with the 3 years in federal prison, I learned to respect process, respect authority, respect my probation officer, respect the rules. So, I recognize that. And obviously, my family was supportive with that for myself as I came out. At that point, I was divorced. And at least with the federal process and my status, I ended up stepping into living with my mom. My dad had passed away during the time I was in prison.
Mhm.
So stepped into living with my mom, who in a sense was my host for that home confinement season, and gradually stepped back into life. But it was a process.
Mhm.
I can appreciate the stair step process that goes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
Even from a federal standpoint, with I'm going to call it the stair step, or maybe letting the leash out as it relates to access to social media, or having a Facebook account.
Mm-hmm.
Just some of the other things. Obviously, my crime was financial fraud, so there are stipulations, or there have been stipulations for myself as it relates to what I do financially. I have restitution to pay back, so the guidelines that go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the process of re-engaging with people from the past. So I've learned to be patient, to be gracious, and to not be offended. I'd say that's one of the lessons that I learned in prison, is not to be offended by others. And there's confrontation in prison, so
Yes.
learning to work through that. Anger management or confrontation management, whatever you want to call it. But even moving back into small town Iowa with folks that hadn't seen me for 3-4 years, how
Mm-hmm.
to handle that interaction or that dialogue or what goes along with that. Um, I was on home confinement for 20 months, so obviously that's a season.
Right.
Just over a year and a half with a 9 p.m. curfew, not able to leave the house or the condo until 6 in the morning. Restrictions in terms of travel, a weekly drug and alcohol screen, so all those things that
Mm-hmm.
go along with that. So that's the process. I'm thankful for an employer who worked with me on that. And it was actually, a local gentleman who had been a friend to me during the time that I was in prison, who hired me to work in his office once I got out. So again, he offered that flexibility with the requirements that went along with PO visits once every couple of weeks and the weekly randoms. So,
Mm-hmm.
gratitude is one of those lessons that's learned also as we step into more freedom, and the appreciation of those things that come back as we're able to step into that, and we're granted those freedoms again.
Yes. 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 And not only patience with other people and the process, but with your own self. Because
Right.
there are times when you just want it to move faster and you want it to go faster, and it goes how it goes. It goes how it
Exactly.
goes. It goes how it goes. Which is life on life's terms. I mean, that's the reality that we all really live in. We just oftentimes people don't have a good reason to actually accept that. Something about prison really teaches you that you need to take life on life's terms. The same thing
That's
with
right.
chronic illness, people who have chronic illness, anything that stops us sort of dead in our tracks for a while and gets our attention. We begin to appreciate, like you say, the little things, and also to be more patient with ourselves because we have to, because there's something that is oppressive on us, something that is over us that we don't necessarily like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a reality check. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Did you find anything about life out here when you came back overwhelming? Was any of it a surprise to you that you were overwhelmed?
I wouldn't say overwhelmed, but obviously the pace and the speed of life, and just I'd say increased. I don't know if I want to increase. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Increased emotion, maybe just more drama.
Yeah.
That's maybe part of it, over with being in a time capsule for 3 years, then coming back out. And obviously, AI and social media and all those things continue
Mhm,
uh, to step up. Technology continues to ramp up. So, that was an adjustment. It wasn't necessarily overwhelming, but it was an adjustment. I'd say that.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, I've heard a lot of guys and women who come out of prison who have done a longer period of time in prison talk about being overwhelmed, like at Walmart, with there are so many choices from by comparison when you're in prison, and people bumping into people and people yelling and people being rude and what have you. That can be pretty overwhelming to some people. So I just wondered if you had any any of those kinds of things to overcome. There are also some people who have gotten out of prison who who still hold on to some of the habits that they got while they were in prison. Like I've known guys who wouldn't get in the shower without shower shoes for like the first year and a half or 2 years or whatever. And
Yeah.
guys who won't sit in a restaurant if they can't see the door. They don't want to be anywhere where they can't see the door, those sorts of things. So I just wondered if you had any of those kind of experiences. And it sounds like you really didn't have that kind of shock it coming out.
Yeah, not terrible, but it was there. There's that awareness that goes along with that, and even part of it is the appreciation of having a bed that's wider than 30 inches. So
And
I found
soft.
myself and soft. Yeah. So it's the awareness, and part of that's the gratitude. Then I'd say also, Sue,
Mhm.
is just having some of those things that are simple but yet a luxury as compared to what incarceration is offering.
Yes, yes. Well, that's awesome. Yes. And do you wanna talk a little bit about what you're doing now in your life as far as, well, whatever you would like to
Sure,
talk about what it's
sure.
like now.
Yeah, so vocationally, when I came out of prison, I mentioned a little bit earlier that a friend of mine hired me to work in his office. So,
Mhm,
office assistant, go for this, go for that, so a variety of different things. My professional career previously was physical therapy. My reality is, until I'm off probation, I'm not able to explore becoming a therapist again or to look at that physical therapy license being reinstated. What's interesting is when I stepped out of my sentence, when my sentence was finished and stepped into probation, one of the stipulations that went along with my sentence was doing 100 hours of community service. Well, the 100 hours of community service were something that I did locally at a faith-based nonprofit group called The Well. And the Well has a thrift store, they have a resource center, and in the midst of volunteering or doing my community service, I found out about a job opportunity. So for
mm,
the past 5 months, I've been managing one of the thrift stores for the Well. So I managed the thrift store for the Well in Knoxville, Iowa. And
mhm,
so that's something that's been fulfilling to me to be in a business setting, a retail setting. Goes back at some level to what I had done in the years past with managing a team. So being
mhm,
able to have coworkers and to be able to work together as a team. And then, just continuing to advance myself in terms of learning and, professional development and some of those
yes,
things. But
yes,
also, I'd say it matches my heart for walking with people.
yes,
Because even as we interact with folks, we're a nonprofit that's intentional about walking with folks that have been impacted by poverty, impacted by
mhm,
incarceration, by addiction, by the challenges of life. And so that's, I'd say, what's been hugely fulfilling to me is to have some life experience. And even as I understand, folks that I've been near to over the past 3, 4, 5 years, I get it. I understand it. And yeah, it's what I'm doing from day to day. And most of the time, it really doesn't feel like a job, but it feels like an opportunity to walk with others, which I appreciate.
that's awesome, that's awesome. And you said that you have contact with your daughters and your grandbabies
Yes,
and still have contact, I assume, to some degree with your ex-wife.
that's right.
And yeah,
Yeah,
and that's going well for your entire family. So that's
that's
wonderful.
right.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, well, is there anything else that you wanted to be sure to talk about today?
I think that's it, Sue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you have any closing words or comments or what you'd like to leave the audience with before we close?
Well, like I had said previously, if people have specific questions, I'm sure willing for people to reach out to me at my email address. Uh, I would say also to folks that are curious or interested or maybe are feeling a calling or are moved to step in to walk with people and family members that are challenged with the incarceration process or prison, jail, the
Mhm.
justice system, uh, you know look into that, explore that, continue to ask questions about what can be done. And, even the opportunities to walk with family members, it might seem like a little thing, but, taking them out for coffee, going to the park with the kids, just some of those things, it's all extremely meaningful. So again, as your videos and these interviews reach out to people, my encouragement to folks that connect with this is follow your heart. And as you maybe feel the spirit moving you to connect to somebody or to reach out or to assist, my encouragement is that makes a huge difference for those families that are impacted by the challenge of incarceration.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree with that. I agree that we have definite opinions about people who are in prison and their families until it hits us at home, and then that totally changes when we find ourselves faced with incarceration. I personally don't have anybody incarcerated. I do have a lot of compassion and empathy and understanding of people who are incarcerated. I'm in contact with a number of people and with the families and the effect of incarceration on the families and the effect of reentry on families. So I agree with you, and I appreciate you saying that. And you will put your information in the comments. So if it's okay with you, then we can close for this particular interview. And let me just close with saying once again, thank you very much for joining us, Mark, and thank you, audience, for joining us and for listening. And if you like what I'm doing, if you don't like what I'm doing, if you like what's being said, if you agree or disagree, please feel free to contact either in the comments or contact me directly at Iowa Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. And that's IA Prison Perspectives at gmail.com. Once again, I'm Sue Hutchins, and this is a collaboration between Living Beyond the Bars of Iowa, Iowa Cure, and the Iowa Justice Action Network. And I thank you very much for joining us. And with that, I shall say good night, and I will see you again soon. Thank you for joining.